Welcome back, Slippy Sliders. I'm Lupinefiasco. This is Daily Fab Gameplay, and a week ago I got back from playing The Calling and Battle Hardened in Kansas City. Playing Arachne slipped through the cracks. Today I'm going to walk you through the changes I made to that deck in preparation for the event, as well as give you a performance review of the deck itself, walk you through my own personal tournament report, and give you some general takeaways for my competitive play. Before we get started with all of that, if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to my channel. It's the best free way to support me and to make sure that you see every new upload from Daily Fab Gameplay. If you want to check out the list that I'm talking about, follow along, or even try it for yourself, there is a Fabry deck link in the video description below. You'll also find a link to my Patreon, where subscribers at the Arc Lightning tier and higher will get access to the matchup guides for all of my tournament deck lists, including this Slippy list, as well as bonus content including draft reviews and additional deck techs. Want to tighten and optimize your gameplay in real life? Use the affiliate link in the video description to get your very own Codex journal, and be sure to use the code LUPINE10, that's LUPINE10, at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Finally, Daily Fab Gameplay is brought to you in part by Hemel from The Bazaar. It has never been more affordable to play in the flesh and blood. Players have been buying the cards they need from Hemel for years. I started buying from him in 2023 and have never found a better deal. The Bazaar's prices are the lowest for singles, full sets, and class sets, including new releases. High Seas singles and more are available now and ship both domestically and internationally. Message Hemel on Blue Sky, Discord, email, or Twitter to see what he can do for you. Now, sharpen your claves, take up the mantle, and let's get into it. This is my same public Slippy deck list that has been on Fabry for some time now. I did a deck tech about this post Pro Tour Singapore, so I'm not going to walk you through all of the card choices again. Not too many of the cards in the deck have changed, and a lot of the explanations for why certain cards are in the deck still hold up now. Infect is a 0 for 5, Leave No Witnesses is a 0 for 4 that destroys the arsenal, Kiss of Death is one of the best stealth attacks in the deck. Not too much has changed. So we're going to walk over to the versions tab, and I will walk through each of the individual choices that I made in changing cards from Singapore to Kansas City. Now keep in mind, I didn't play this deck in Pro Tour Singapore. I wish I had. So all of these changes have been informed by following along with tournament results since Pro Tour Singapore, working with my own teammates, working with friends, and my own general opinion on how to play the deck, as well as my own personal play style. So I'll walk you through the changes, then we'll head back over to the main cards page, go to the maybe board, and talk about some cards that aren't in the deck, that maybe could be, or maybe even should be. So we'll start with what I took out. First is Mask of Perdition. This really is still a relevant card. I know competitive Slippy players who are playing Mask of Perdition. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing this. It's very good against redline decks, Syndra being the main culprit, but Fang certainly coming up in the meta as well. If nothing else, Mask of Perdition is an onboard attack reaction for Bonds of Agony. Why I don't like Mask is I generally don't have trouble turning on Bonds of Agony. Between Redback Shroud, Flick Knives, and Blacktip Whisperers, I'm really not hurting for onboard attack reactions in aggro metas, or aggro matchups. And when you are not using this for Bonds of Agony, you're really using it on two cards, Art of Desire Body and Leave No Witnesses. Leave No Witnesses is the lower impact card between the two. You're using Perdition on Leave No Witnesses in the hopes that you're going to get 2 red cards off the top of the deck that will let you generate 2 silver to spend at the start of your next turn to immediately rebuy the Mask of Perdition, and that all makes sense. But you would really want a higher impact piece of head equipment. You want Crown of Providence a lot of the time. It blocks 2 compared to Perdition's 1. It bails out your arsenal against Syndra, playing something like a Breaking Point. And with Art of Desire Body, the real reason to use this card so that you can banish 2 reds off the top, draw 2 cards, and gain 2 life, well, you only have 3 copies of Art of Desire Body in your deck. You might not see them, it might get blocked for 3 anyway, and if you don't have a reaction to get the Art of Desire over the top of that block, then Mask of Perdition doesn't do anything. If you use Perdition on an unblocked Art of Desire Body and your opponent plays a defense reaction, you just burned your mask for not really any benefit, and now you're hoping that you're generating the silver from Leave No Witnesses to buy your mask back. So it just seems like the juice isn't worth the squeeze, and in order to free up a sideboard slot, I cut Mask of Perdition. Battlefront Bastion is a card that I've been really impressed with previously. US Nationals, I absolutely tore apart a Prism player with 3 copies of Battlefront Bastion in the deck, working as a popper for Herald of Triumph, and then even having the floating 1 point of damage prevention after they used their Phantasmal Footsteps to cover up a blue Herald with a Sink Below. But we're not in a meta where Prism is as prevalent as she was in US Nationals. Pro Tour Singapore saw her popularity fall off a bit, and she hasn't really been doing all that much since then. But even if we were going to keep poppers for Triumph in our deck, it wouldn't be Battlefront Bastion, it would be Blanche. Blanche is that 7-power popper for Herald of Triumph, but it also has extremely relevant text against Gravy, being a card that turns off not only Gravy's ability to play from graveyard whenever he discards a blue or puts a blue into the graveyard, but it also turns off the text of Golden Tipple because the allies aren't yellow for that turn. So if we did want to play with poppers, we would be playing Blanches because they have use against 2 heroes, Prism and Gravy. Battlefront Bastion only has use against 1 hero, being Prism. Double Trouble Red is a card that I'm much higher on now than I was at the start of my Kansas City prep. Thomas Cauffier talked very highly about Double Trouble in not only his deck tech with Ethnic Smoke after Pro Tour Singapore, but also in the video he made with me detailing his Metafy Slippy guide. And I was a doubter. I didn't think that the 0 for 5 was really worth it. We need 2 reactions. I would rather have my reactions for Bonds of Agony or save them for other more useful cards. I'm not going to flick a Clave for a Double Trouble where I could save it for a Mark of the Black Widow. But after playing with Double Trouble, I am very much a believer in the card. At maximum, it's a 2-card 10. You play Double Trouble, you break Redback Shroud, you play Spike with Blood Rot. But even outside of that, Double Trouble is a really nice way to finish a game when you take up the mantle into it. We all see Take Up the Mantle, especially with the current discourse about the power level of Bonds of Agony, and we think, well, it's just Bonds 4 through 6. But when you're getting down to smaller hands at the end of a game, maybe you don't have any of your equipment left besides possibly Flick Knives, you don't always have a way to turn on Bonds of Agony after you take up into it. But with a 2-card hand of a Stealth Attack, Take Up the Mantle, and an onboard Flick Knives and Hunter's Clave, you can play your Stealth Attack, flick the Clave, mark your opponent, take up into Double Trouble, and now you're looking at a 2-card 9. And if your opponent isn't blocking around your 2-card 9, maybe expecting you to have a 2-card 7 with a Razor's Edge, or saying, well, you can't take up into Bonds of Agony, so I don't need to block your attack for anything more than 3, suddenly they're taking 5 points of damage, and I won at least 2 games that weekend between side events, the Calling and the Battle Hardened, taking up into a Double Trouble. More than that, the on-hit of an active Double Trouble is relevant into a lot of matchups. Slippy Mirrors can go to Fatigue, the Gravy matchup can go to Fatigue, and taking 2 cards off the top of the deck is a very relevant effect a lot of the time. I'm only playing 2 copies of Double Trouble because without the attack reactions, it is just a 0 for 3 go again. It blocks for 3, there's nothing wrong with that. But if we're talking impactful stealth attacks, we want something more than just a head jab. And I wanted to make room for Spike with Blood Rot, a card that I'll talk about later that 3 copies of have found their way into my deck. So Double Trouble is only on 2, But even if you're not a believer in Double Trouble like I am, you think, well, 2 copies is maybe a little too many, I do think that every Slippy list should be running 1 copy of Double Trouble for that late game take up the mantle turn. It's just very strong. Codex of Bloodrot is a card that I am probably going to put back into my list at some point. I wasn't playing it for Kansas City because I was not expecting a large amount of Earth Heroes, and that is really where Codex shines. It is effectively a 0 for 2 go again that replaces itself. Give your opponent a Bloodrot, you give yourself a Ponder, but not only that, you are forcing the Earth Hero to put a card from their hand into their arsenal, and this does a number of things. 1, Earth Heroes play a lot of junky blues, and if you can force them to put a bad blue from their hand into their arsenal, they're going to need to spend time at some point clearing out that arsenal, and that could potentially be very bad for them. I mean, as a best case scenario, we're looking at like they had to put Seeds of Tomorrow into their arsenal. Is that going to happen often? Of course not, but it is something that could happen. It's not outside the realm of possibility that your opponent now has to choose between discarding their blue Fruits of the Forest or red Fruits of the Forest or arsenaling it. And if your opponent does arsenal a card, that opens the door for your Codex of Frailty to not give your opponent Felling of the Crown or Plow Under. But I wasn't expecting a lot of Earth Heroes. I didn't play Codex of Bloodrot. I ended up not playing against any of the Verdances who were roaming around the top tables of Kansas City, but as we are seeing an increase in Earth Hero representation, Verdance players are figuring out the Gravy matchup, and once they do that, Verdance will be far and away the best deck in the format. We want to bring back Codex of Bloodrot. Codex of Bloodrot also has some decent play against Victor. Now, I don't like playing 2 blocks against Victor, but if you can make Victor put a junky blue, or best case scenario, a block card into his arsenal, then you are in a very, very strong position, especially with that same interaction of playing Codex of Frailty and not giving Victor the opportunity to get something like a Golden Sun. Shred, again, a card that is potentially very strong against Guardian and Earth Heroes, but I wasn't expecting to see as many of them as I did. It's also a card that is very contextual. Your opponent needs to block, and if you are in a position where you're playing from behind and your opponent is just taking whatever you throw at them, you're not going to be able to play your Shred. So it is inconsistent enough that I didn't want to play it in my deck, and honestly, I don't think I really missed it all of that weekend. Finally, Bonds of Attraction. This was my 12th blue. I think I only need 11 blues. I wanted to free up space for a more impactful card in the main deck, and with Bonds of Attraction blue really only being useful against Gravy, has some marginal benefits against other heroes, banishing a Kunai from Syndra, or a Clave from Slippy, or a Leave No Witnesses or Command and Conquer from Assassin. It just didn't seem high impact enough, so I cut it. What did I put in place of these 12 cards? 9 cards. Math is hard. First, we put in Balance of Justice. Balance of Justice is very good against a lot of heroes that you will run into over the course of a long tournament. First and foremost being Gravy. Gravies are going to break multiple gold in a turn. They're going to break a gold, use Gravy's ability to draw and then discard. They'll break a gold and then tipple. They'll do any number of things that draw a card and have the potential to break a gold or use Gravy to draw and discard. And Balance of Justice just says you are getting 5 points of value out of your headpiece. At some point in the game you will block 2. It will probably be against a breakpoint with gold generation attached to it. It's called Baited Hook, Avasti, Loot the Hold, or in some cases, Conqueror of the High Seas. You could put Balance and 2/3 blocks in front of it to protect an arsenal, and then you will break it after Gravy draws 2, get your random card off the top that should be worth an average of 3 points of value, and you can either use that for defense or you can use it to pivot. But Balance of Justice, very strong against Gravy, also very strong against Dash.io, who has maybe played Spark of Genius and activated Cerebellum Processor in the same turn. Very strong against a Syndra, who uses a Throw Dagger or Ancestral Empowerment to either keep Mask of Momentum alive or to trigger it. It is good against Acilio, who draws twice off of Sigil of Brilliance, or uses Flash of Brilliance defensively to bounce the Sigil of Brilliance, draw a card, and then use the Acilio text to discard and draw, or use Sink Below to draw in the bottom and then draw a card. There are multiple top tier decks that Balance of Justice is very good against. There are multiple lower tier heroes that Balance is very good against. It's a card that I really like having in my deck. We added Redback Shroud. This is an easy one. It's a card that I was previously too low on. It blocks for 1. It's an onboard attack reaction for Bonds of Agony. It pays for your Spike with Bloodrot, which is, again, a 2-card 10 with Double Trouble. It is 2/3 of a Bonds of Agony trigger. It works very well with Kiss of Death. If your line is Kiss, Shroud, Spike with Bloodrot, Kiss deals damage, deals an extra point of damage, makes a Bloodrot, you have a follow-up attack, you flick the Kiss will trigger Spike with Bloodrot again, and that was all enabled by Redback Shroud. Depending on how many spikes you're playing, it is also a very good target to buy back with 2 silver if you manage to generate those over the course of the game. I was very happy with Redback Shroud. We'll jump down the list a bit to talk about Spike with Bloodrot because we just talked about Shroud, and Spike is the reason that we're playing Shroud. Spike with Bloodrot is a 1-for-5 effectively. If you hit, you generate the Bloodrot. It has really good synergy with Double Trouble and Bonds of Agony. It has even better synergy with Kiss of Death, but there are just instances where 1-for-3 will get your attack over the top of blocks. You have a floating resource because you pitched a blue to attack with a Hunter's Clave, and then you also give your opponent a Bloodrot, and a lot of the time that's just good enough. In the times where you don't have your resources or your Shroud to pay for Spike with Bloodrot, you just block with it. I don't recommend arsenaling this card, especially as you are getting down to lower life totals. Against aggressive decks, it can be difficult to hold on to enough cards to actually pay for Spike with Bloodrot and have a stealth target for it. But it's a really good card. I recommend playing 2 copies at minimum. I'm playing 3 now because multiple times over the tournament, I would think, wow, I really wish I had a Spike with Bloodrot here, and it was either because I hadn't seen any copies yet, or I had already played or blocked with 2 copies, and I wanted the 3rd one, so I am testing those 3 copies now. Jumping back up to Bonds of Attraction, everything I said about the blue bonds, at least the upsides, apply to red bonds. Very good against Gravy because you can banish an ally from Graveyard. Marginal upside against Syndra, other assassins, even Acilios are going to want to keep sigils in their graveyard that they can pick up with Etchings of Arcane. So Bonds is always just kind of fine. Outside of Gravy, it's never going to overperform. It's always just a head jab. Very rarely gets blocked, so most of the time it is a 0-for-4. But I really put this list together to target Gravy, which is currently the best deck in the format, and if we don't get any bans on September 1st, will continue to be the best deck in the format. So Bonds is just pretty good. I bring it in most of the time, but it's never an overperformer, and that's why I'm on 2 copies of it instead of 3. Same goes for Pick Up the Point. I'm never playing this in the main board. This only ever comes in for Gravy and Earth Heroes. Against Gravy, it is an unconditional go-again head jab. It also gives you some neat play with your Spring Tunic, or if you attack with a Clave, float a resource, flick another Clave, play Pick Up the Point, use the floating resource to get your Clave back. It's a cute little way to convert a blue or your Tunic into making Pick Up the Point a 0-for-4 at some point over the course of the turn cycle. But the main reason we're playing it, even without the retrieve, is to have extra play into Gravy to kill allies on board. We also bring it in against the Earth Heroes as a turn extender. You never want to have too many stealth attacks in your hand against Verdants or Florians. Sometimes they just block out and pass, or don't have a good way to convert their full 4-card hand into damage or tempo, you do wind up ahead and you just want turn extenders. But based on the current meta, this really is just gravy tech. So that is it for the changes I made. Let's talk about the maybe board and maybe some cards that you would expect to be in the deck but aren't. We talked about Mask of Perdition. I talked about Blanche. It just isn't a card that I feel is necessary right now. I don't think Prism is abundant enough or a bad enough matchup for Slippy that we really need dedicated poppers. And against Gravy, Blanche is strong, but it costs 3. I have 11 blues in my deck. It's possible that on September 1st we get a Bonds of Agony ban and we end up needing to adjust the number of blues in our deck. Blanche can just be very difficult to actually play. It is likely replacing a stealth attack. None of our reactions work on Blanche. It blocks for 2. It's never something I want to arsenal off of a Ponder. There are just enough times where Blanche doesn't do enough that I would rather have something more consistent. We'll talk about Savor Bloodshed. I think this is the card that is really going to surprise a lot of people that I'm not playing it. A lot of people, even on my team, will disagree with me. But I don't want to attack with daggers, ever. It just isn't something that is efficient for us to pay for. For one thing, you either need your Tunic up or you need a Calicera to actually turn a blue into 2 dagger attacks. But more than that, our blues are cards we want to be playing. We want to play Persuasive Prognosis, or Bonds of Agony, or Concealed Blade. Even Double Trouble Blue is a card that I don't mind playing, or at least getting into my graveyard, so that I have future targets for Take Up the Mantle. And Savor Bloodshed says that we need to be pitching those blues. And depending on where you are in the game, if you haven't put a Bonds of Agony into your graveyard yet, and you have one in your hand and you're only blue, there's no way that you're pitching that to a Hunter's Clave. More than that, because we are relying on Mark of the Black Widow and Bonds of Agony and Take Up the Mantle to act as our primary forms of disruption, all of those cards require the opponent to be marked. So we're really going to be saving our Hunter's Claves to flick at our opponent to mark for Black Widow, Bonds, Take Up the Mantle, which when they hit will immediately consume the mark, and that leaves Savor Bloodshed as this sort of weird mark benefit 7 through 9, where if it works out we draw a card and that's pretty cool, but if it doesn't work out then maybe we did a 2-card 5, or we used our flick and it got sheltered and then the Savor didn't do anything and now we're down a Hunter's Clave. And even if everything goes right, our opponent is marked, we play Savor Bloodshed, we attack with a dagger, our opponent doesn't block it, depending on your hand and arsenal. And I had this happen to me in the calling. Slippy does not always use a random card off the top of its deck well. So if you have a reaction in arsenal, and you attack with your dagger and you hit and you draw another reaction, or you draw an attack that cannot be reacted onto, it just didn't really do anything. Like, your deck can be clunky, and random cards off the top of your deck can be clunky. And you might not have the action point after you hit with a Graphene Calicera to even play the card that you drew off the top of your deck, and if you already have an arsenal, then you're just taking an intellect penalty. So I understand why so many people like Savor Bloodshed, and this is where I'm saying maybe it's just the way that I'm approaching the game, or my matchups, or how to play the hero, but I'm not seeing consistent benefit from Savor Bloodshed to the point where I've just cut it. And I felt like when I added it back into my deck for the Battle Hardened on Sunday, it was a red 3 block so much of the time. Very rarely did I ever get the card draw from it, or did it line up with Kiss of Death. A lot of the time it was just something I would block with, and in that case I would rather have it be anything else. Finally, we have Surgical Extraction, and I think this is going to get the opposite reaction to Savor Bloodshed. Well, why would you ever play Surgical Extraction? You just talked about how expensive Blanche is. Surgical is not a card that we can afford. None of our reactions work on it, except for Concealed Blade. Why am I talking about Surgical Extraction? And the answer is Earth Heroes and Guardians. And we're not talking about playing this in first cycle. We're talking about pitching Surgical with another blue next to it to draw in your second cycle when your opponent has worked through all of their armor and all of their defense reactions, and suddenly Surgical is a 2-for-4 that requires 2 cards to answer. And if you're throwing Surgical at the end of a combat chain, maybe you send something like Hunter's Clave into Mark of the Black Widow into Tunic Surgical. Your opponent already blocked possibly the Clave, definitely the Black Widow, and now needs to respect Surgical Extraction as well. You can just put yourself into positions where your Guardian or Earth opponent really needs to respect this card and doesn't want to. But there's a reason it's in the maybe board, in that I don't know, one, how popular Guardian is going to be. We are getting Super Slam very soon, but with current top decks being Gravy Bones and Verdants, no one should be playing Guardian right now. And even then, we have bans coming September 1st. It's very possible that the current meta will get shaken up to the point where Verdants and Guardian either don't matter or are so prevalent that, hey, Surgical isn't going to be what bails us out of 2 very bad matchups. So it's in the maybe board. It's something I want to consider. We're going to wait and see how the rest of spoiler season and the September 1st ban announcements shake out. But until then, I'm just considering Surgical, but it's not in the deck. Overall, I think the deck performed very well. I didn't perform as well with it as I would have liked. But in general, despite my 4-3 record in the Calling and then subsequent 4-3 record in Battle Hardened, I'm not unhappy with my performance. I went into both events with a growth-oriented mindset. My goal was get good reps, learn new matchups, improve with the deck, and I think that's exactly what I did. I will have the screen caps from my Codex journal posted later this week. It'll be on my Patreon. It'll be available for free to anyone who wants to see if you want to sort of get in my head after each of my matchups. But in general, the games that I lost then informed and fueled future wins. So in the Calling, my 3 losses were an Ira in round 4, a Acilio in round 6, and a Victor in round 7. Now, the Ira loss in round 4 is perhaps the biggest punt I have ever made in Flesh and Blood. I absolutely cost myself this game by not playing a reaction out of my arsenal on a stealth attack so that I could then play a Codex of Frailty later in the turn. And this resulted not only in a pseudo-intellect penalty for myself, as I just ended my turn with a card in Arsenal and a Codex of Frailty in hand, but it gave my opponent some space to catch back up in the game, and eventually they got the win with just 3 life left, and that definitely would not have happened had I gone through this turn cycle. But what it did let me know is, if the only reason I lost this game is because of this horrible, terrible punt, well, that means that I'm navigating the Ira matchup really well, and this was a 12D react, 3 snag Ira list, built and designed to counter what I'm doing. And if the only way that I lose this game is by punting horribly, well, that means that I have a very good understanding of how to actually play the matchup. My Acilio loss in round 6 was honestly, I just got rolled. My opponent and I talked about it after. There was a 0% chance that I was going to win this game based on how it all unfolded. I won the die roll, chose to go second. My opponent plays Channel Lightning Valley Comet Storm on turn 0, which is the absolute worst thing that they can do for me. End up drawing and arsenaling a card. My turn is Persuasive Prognosis, which gets blocked for 1. I Justinic with both modes active. Justinic banishes red Blast to Oblivion. Persuasive Prognosis banishes red Blast to Oblivion. And I take a Gone in a Flash out of hand. I'm feeling fantastic. Their turn is play Sigil of Brilliance, play Channel Lightning Valley, play Comet Storm, Arsenal pass, keep the new Channel Lightning on board, lose the old one. My turn is some ineffective BS because none of it is disruptive. My opponent blocks with Flash of Brilliance, discards a card, picks up Sigil of Brilliance, draws a card, then on their turn proceeds to draw 6 cards from the same Sigil of Brilliance using the red Blast to Oblivion, a Somersault, and 2 yellow Blast to Oblivions in their hand. They had 5 combo pieces and a Sigil in the top 12 cards of their deck. I mean, there's no way that I'm going to win that game, and we talked about it. The Acilio players feel like Slippy is a bad matchup for them unless they absolutely high roll, and that's what happened this game. My round 7 loss against Victor came down to Victor resolving and winning 7 clashes, and at the time I felt like that's just unlucky. How could I possibly win this game? And to an extent, losing all of those clashes is a bit unlucky. Now that's what Victor is built to do, but if you've played the Victor matchup, you know that sometimes Test of Strength reveals Test of Strength. They break their shield, bottom a card, and then flip, visit the Goldmane estate. The deck does have tension with how many non-attack cards they are playing with their clash cards. But it did inform, as I thought more about it, that I was playing towards really my old knowledge of the Guardian matchup from the old days of 5 versus Bravo, where I'm looking to outvalue the Guardian by arsenaling defense reactions, getting to 1 card block Crush the week, and then firing back with 4 cards. And that's all well and good against Bravo and maybe even Valda. But against Victor, who is drawing extra cards by winning clashes, I'm never going to outvalue Victor, because as Arachne, I'm never winning clashes unless Victor loses. The most powerful attack in my deck is Command and Conquer. I only have 3 of them. It has 6 power and is going to lose to every card in Victor's deck except for maybe his non-attacks or like blue Clash of Vigor, if he's playing that. So I'm never going to outvalue Victor, so instead of arsenaling these defense reactions, I need to be playing towards what my deck does really well, which is Bonds of Agni. Because Victors aren't playing defense reactions, they don't have the deck space to play cards that don't win clashes. So why I bring that up is the next day at the Battle Hardened, I played against Chrysiali's Victor Goldmane and won that game based on playing towards these big Bonds turns. So it did mean adjusting my mindset, and in that Battle Hardened, I went 4-3. My losses were to Arachne Marionette in round 2. I lost to a Fang in round 6, and then the Slippy Mirror in round 7. The Marionette loss in round 2, my opponent was insane. Played very, very well, navigated the Assassin Mirror very well. But that gave me some matchup knowledge that I had previously ignored. Marionette wasn't a deck I tested against. I thought, oh, this is just doomed for Slippy. I don't think the matchup is that bad after playing it twice. We're maybe 40-60 to win, but you can definitely get there. So the Marionette matchup helped me then win another Marionette matchup later in the day. I talked about how my Victor loss from the previous round informed my Victor win in the Battle Hardened. The Fang loss in round 6 really just showed me, hey, this deck is real. It hasn't been real for a while. The Fang players finally figured it out, and we're seeing that now as Fang converted very well in Calling Copenhagen, ending up in the finals losing to a Slippy that just absolutely high-rolled him. But that is a bad matchup for Slippy, and it's now something that I know I need to prepare for. And finally, the Slippy loss in round 7 was the only Slippy Mirror I lost that weekend. Really gave me the opportunity for a great conversation with my opponent about what was working for him, what sort of deck building decisions he made. We both came to this conclusion that Savor Bloodshed just felt very medium for both of us. Maybe it's a card that needs to be cut. Mark of the Black Widow is also a very underwhelming card, but is just a necessary evil when the 5th through 8th most represented decks are going to be some combination of Dash.io, Acilio, Syndra, and Fang. These hyper aggro decks that Slippy just falls over to if it isn't constantly disrupting them. And that was really good knowledge to have, really informed the deck changes and improvements that I just detailed a few minutes ago. So overall, very happy with my performance. My record doesn't bear that out, but overall I do feel like I had a good tournament performance. I played to the best of my ability, I learned things, and I am walking away from it a better player. And that's really my takeaway from the weekend, is to just keep doing what I'm doing. 4 out of 5 of my picks for the most represented decks ended up being correct. My picks were Gravy, Slippy, Victor, Ira, and what I'm calling the hyper aggro triangle of Acilio Dio Syndra. Victor did not make the top 5 represented heroes in Kansas City. Verdance ended up filling that spot. I now know that I need to respect Verdance again because they are really just disregarding their horrendous matchup in Gravy Bones and generally letting their way through, or at least figuring out the Gravy matchup. But I felt like, just like in Pro Tour Singapore, my ability to anticipate the meta, very good. My practice into the anticipated meta, very helpful. I had a great grasp of the Slippy matchup. I felt like I knew what I was doing against Ira. The one Acilio loss was tragic, but I did know what I'm supposed to be doing in that matchup, and I can definitely identify, well, I bricked on Disruption one time, and the Acilio happened to have it, so yeah, that was unfortunate. I ended up fatiguing Dash.io. That's now something that I know I need to be doing and need to approach the matchup in that way. Syndra still favored, but I can anticipate that maybe Michael Yasker's list is taking on some popularity and Syndras are playing 9 defense reactions and 1 to 3 copies of Snag. So I just keep doing what I'm doing. I may be missing some secret ingredient here. My practice and my preparation is going well, but the tournament record doesn't always bear that out. So you're going to take some time, reflect on that. But in the meantime, keep grinding, keep plugging away with Slip Through the Cracks. Continue to watch the meta, how it grows and develops, especially with Super Slam spoilers and the banned and restricted announcement on September 1st. And really looking forward to getting to know the Living Legend format, putting my tournament prep and practice into, putting it to work for Calling Philadelphia, where I will be playing the Living Legend Calling. Just excited to keep playing Flesh and Blood. Feel like I've got a good headspace for the game right now, and excited to see that pay off, and excited to keep giving you all the sort of content that hopefully you're enjoying and hopefully is helpful to you. I hope you enjoyed this little update / impromptu tournament report. I hope you're looking forward to seeing those Codex Journal pages get posted later this week. I'll be posting on Blue Sky when those do go live on Patreon, and if you are a member of my Patreon, either free or paid, you'll get an email when those go live. I hope you enjoy those. I'll be back later this week with more of the same content that you know and love. Until the next time I see you, take care.